I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your experience on the panel. Was it a journey of discovery? Tell us about why you joined and your experience.
The phone rang and it was David Gonski. And David said, "Catherine, it's David Gonski and I have something to ask you." And I said, "David, whatever it is, the answer's yes." But I was very committed to what the then Minister, Julia Gillard, was trying to achieve and the government was trying to achieve in the establishment of the Gonski Review of Funding.
I think the key thing that came home to me was the real difference between what we call quality teaching and quality of education. What Gonski is saying when you strip it down to the chassis is things like every 8-year-old must be able to read to national minimum standard in year 3 or the rest of their learning will suffer. We will never have equality of outcomes. What we must have is equality of opportunity.
So if you just take that fundamental, because education is the building block of a democratic society and public education is the linchpin. So you just have that basic tenet that's where we start from, and we just built on from there. And the equity issues that Ken is referring to, you know, irrespective of where the child is located, their access to quality education is the fundamental building block of our country.
Is that what this review found and what it warned has been vindicated by mounting evidence so soon after it reported.
Okay, we all know that the Gonski panel defined equity in terms of an aspiration that differences in educational outcomes are not the result of differences in wealth, income, power or possessions. Over the years since Gonski reported, government schools have had their funding increased on average by around 3.6% per annum. That's inflation rate. The Catholic schools have had their government funding per student increased by around 5% per annum, and the independent schools by 5.5%. So the sector with the lowest percentage of disadvantaged students has received the higher increase. The Catholics, who have arguably more of our more difficult, more disadvantaged students, get slightly less, and the government sector has received, who are taking most, the lion's share of our disadvantaged students, received the least increase in funding. It seems that the indicators of need have been pointing one way, while public funding for schools has been continuing to go the other way.
The review found that our schooling funding lacks logic and consistency. My School reveals hundreds of schools which are funded, even just by governments, in ways which seem to defy gravity. There are about 500 public and private secondary schools alone which receive less government funding than at least one nearby more advantaged private school in the same electorate. Business as usual just won't cut it. The changes we've been able to illustrate using My School data have not taken place over decades. They've occurred across the very same year that the Gonski Review proceeded, reported, was variously ignored, cherry-picked, partially implemented, and then in relative terms, largely abandoned. What the Gonski Review panel found to be bad, we find to be worse. You might eventually feel the need for a review. The good news, and I did promise some good news, is that you don't have to. The work has been done. Get on with it.
The gap between our top 20% and our bottom 20% of 15-year-olds, year 9s, in reading is 5 years of schooling. The only way forward is to elect a government that will implement Gonski. I mean, that is the only way forward.
The New South Wales government is to be congratulated, and has been congratulated, for being the earliest and most enthusiastic adopter of Gonski funding principles. And let's hope that other jurisdictions follow soon. Thank you.
I want to ask a question.